Welcome to the Angle Fantasy Basketball Podcast. I'm your host, Andrew. Here at Angle, we cover both Dynasty and Redraft fantasy basketball content. So if you want to see all of the content that we made, you can find it in one place. We made it easy for you, and that's anglefantasybasketball.wordpress.com. Also, make sure to follow us on Twitter at AngleFantasyBB. This podcast is available on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify as well. Today, we are doing a preview for NCAA prospects. So this is coming in from a Dynasty basketball perspective. The NCAA season starts on November 2nd. So a quick disclaimer, we are only discussing prospects that are going to be playing in the NCAA season. So this is not covering prospects that are going to be playing overseas, such as Nolan Traore. It's not going to be covering prospects playing in the G League, such as Dink Pate. Only NCAA prospects today. So I got a couple of special guests with me. First off, I must mention it is currently Game 4 of the World Series. So this may be my last podcast featuring Dodgers propaganda. I guess we'll see how it goes from there. But first off, the person who I've been forcing to cheer for the Dodgers with me, even though he doesn't watch baseball at all, is my fellow Angle analyst, Mitchell. How are you today, buddy? You ready to talk about the very talented 2025 draft class?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of hype around it. There's a lot of whispers that it's the best draft class in the last 20 years. So we'll go ahead and see. And maybe it'll actually play out that way, right? So maybe they said it just because, LeBron's was 21 years ago. So just off the mark. So we'll go ahead and see. There's a lot of exciting prospects that we're going to cover today. And yeah, let's get to it.
And also joining us today is a very special guest with his first appearance on an Angle Fantasy Basketball podcast. He makes content for Roto World. He is the host of the Tank Me Later podcast, and he was gracious enough to let me use his platform to talk about AJ Mitchell's for 10 minutes straight like a lunatic. Noah Rubin, how are you doing today, buddy?
Gentlemen, I am doing well. I appreciate you both for having me on. Hopefully that's enough of the baseball talk, or else I won't be able to really contribute to this podcast either. It might just be another 10-minute monologue from you talking about the Dodgers. But I got to give you guys both credit because, I mean, all you guys were in on AJ Mitchell, and he had a great summer league, great preseason. He's already seeing rotation minutes on a really good team. So I know maybe it started from a little bit of bias based on the school, but great scouting by all you guys.
Well, we very much appreciate that. And, one thing we have to talk about is that you in particular gave us an opportunity to be able to heavily scout some of these NCAA prospects that we can kind of journey along through the season with. So you put together an industry-run league for only NCAA players. So it's just a standard redraft league, what we normally do for the NBA, but this one's focused only on NCAA prospects. So I was in it last year when you first started it. I'm in it again this year. It's very, very fun to do that. I love doing that where we kind of just get to travel through the season with a lot of these guys. Like a lot of us will have, obviously blue chip talent on our team, guys that we expect to get drafted. So that's always fun to follow them from beginning of the college season until the point that they get drafted, but also having on some of these upperclassmen who probably will never get drafted, but, put up win now stats for our team because there's a little bit of competitiveness within that league too. So it's fun to see that balance as well as also trying to go see some of the prospects that we have on our teams in person too. And then Mitchell, I believe, so there's a Debbie League that was put together. This is a league where, yes, it's a dynasty basketball league, but you can also get these NCAA players on your team far ahead of time. So Mitch is in that league, which is also, an industry ran league, which means it contains many different dynasty analysts from across the industry in there. And Noah, I believe you're in that league too. Is that correct?
That is correct. I've been enjoying drafting all NBA players, a lot of the young guys so far. I haven't ventured to draft any draft picks yet, but I'm liking the way my team's shaping out.
Very good. Very good. All right. So that's going to be fun to watch, continuing to see how that draft plays out. And then obviously for you and I, our NCAA redraft league is going to begin early next week. So that's what we're doing today is we are going to talk about 9 different NCAA players that are likely going to get drafted in the first round. We're mostly focusing on guys that we think will be drafted within the lottery or at least very close to the lottery. So what we're going to be discussing with each prospect is, of course, our notes on that prospect. We have a rating system, which if you've seen our prospect videos last year, it's going to be the same type of rating system again for key attributes in their game. We will also have player archetype comparisons. So giving you an idea of what this player's stat set might look like, because obviously for fantasy basketball, especially in 9-category fantasy basketball, that gives us a very good clue as to how useful a player might be within that scoring system, is looking at what some current or past NBA players that they could be comparative to or like. And then also what we do, since this is basically a preseason look, the season has not started yet, at least the regular season for NCAA, is we are going to highlight key matchups that these guys are playing in as well too. So these are likely going to be nationally televised matchups. And in these matchups, these guys will either be playing a team that is currently ranked inside the AP top 25, or a team that features other likely first round prospects on there as well, or maybe just a combination of both. So that is all of the information we're going to be discussing on each of these prospects today. And so we got 9 of them. Let's go ahead and get started.
All right. First prospect that we're going to talk about is Collin Murray-Boyles, who is, you got it listed here, 6'7", 245. Obviously a pretty stocky guy, playing power forward for South Carolina. A guy that I thought may have been a lottery pick last year, may have been a top 10 pick even last year, but ended up returning for another year at South Carolina, which I think was a tad surprising. I remember when that was reported, there was a lot of draft guys that were like, yeah, I don't necessarily believe that yet, just because they expected him to come out because he's a very talented player. And I think he's going to be a guy that could be a lottery pick once again this year, even though he's a sophomore in what Mitch called and what other people are calling one of the best draft classes of the last 20 years. Some of my notes on him, I think he's a very high energy player, which makes him a guy that a lot of NBA teams will like, regardless of how he may fit in with his play style on certain teams. He's going to have a role everywhere, which makes him an intriguing guy for fantasy as well, because he can do a little bit of everything. He rebounds fairly well, despite him being a little bit shorter, but it's because of that extra strength that I think helps him out there. Gets some defensive stats. The main question mark for me, which is something that I think there's been some clips of where he's kind of improved already. We'll see how it actually translates into the season, but can he become a shooter? Can he become a threat from beyond the arc? Because in the modern NBA, there's not a lot of 6'7" guys that can't shoot that have success without being incredible defenders, which he can be both. He can be a guy that's a really good defender and can space the floor a little bit. My player archetype that I was kind of comparing him to, I know the popular one is Julius Randle. I wanted to go with a little bit of a different direction with Zach Randolph, partially because he's a shorter, stockier guy that is left-handed. But I think maybe if he develops as a shooter and continues to develop with the ball in his hands, that Julius Randle's a very likely path for him, or something kind of similar to that. Some of the big matchups you guys have listed here, pretty early on in the season, playing at number 17 Indiana, and then a couple games after the new year starts against Alabama and Texas. Those would be some big matchups to watch. I know that Texas has Trey Johnson, which I don't remember if we're talking about him later or not, but another guy that's going to go pretty early in the draft. Yeah, and then so we also have these prospect ratings that I came up with a little bit. Um, you guys have your template, which I'm going to go off of athleticism. He's, not the most athletic, what we talked about, but gave him an 8 for that. The size gave him a 7. Like I said, a little bit shorter, not necessarily the ideal lanky guy that's coming out that some teams are playing at the 4 and 5 these days. I think he's a very good defender. Gave him a 9 for that. Passing a 6, dribbling a 5. We'll see if that continues to develop in his second year. Like, how much of a leap can he take? The main thing, like I said, the jump shot got as a 3. Maybe that improves. I'd like to see that a lot this year. I think that helps him a lot. He can make a case to be drafted much earlier if that improves. NBA ready, I put 9. I think that he is a guy that could have came out last year. I think that extra year in college will just make him even more ready to be drafted and maybe make an impact from day one. Potential an 8. I don't think he's got this unlimited ceiling that a lot of the other guys in this class do, but I think he can still be a very effective player. Maybe his ceiling, and I think this probably goes for a lot of guys coming into the draft at this point, is maybe an all-star level player. Maybe, we'll see. But I think that the potential is there, but not elite superstar level.
So with Collin Murray-Boyles, I remember there was a little phase there that the NBA was going through where they were liking these like 6'7" but like stocky, really strong guys. So like to a much lesser extent, I think Murray-Boyles is better than both of these guys. But like for example, recent examples is like Kenny Lofton as well as David
Mm.
Roddy. Do you feel like Murray-Boyles is probably just a roided up, much better version of something like that some of these NBA teams were trying out recently?
Yeah, I mean, he better be because I mean, Kenny Lofton just hasn't really panned out despite playing pretty well in college. I think he's one of those guys that even if he's putting up numbers, I think everybody kind of knows that it's like he hasn't shown that he can be a guy that you'd want to be in a starting lineup every day on a competitive team. And David Roddy also, I think that he's kind of a different player. He is like a stockier guy as well. He's actually giving the Hawks some solid minutes right now, partially out of necessity because literally everybody in the rotation is injured. But yeah, I think he'll be better than both of those guys.
So that's going to take us to our next process or prospect here. Mitch, tell us about Liam McNeeley.
Yeah, so we have Liam McNeeley that we're going to cover. He's a small forward from Mountain Verde Academy, teammate of Cooper Flagg, who, sneak peek, we're going to be covering a little later in this pod, who has a height of 6'7", solid weight at 210. So first and foremost, what you need to know about Liam McNeeley is that he's a knockdown shooter who is a 44% three-point shooter as a senior in high school, playing for a very competitive team. And there's always going to be a great need for shooting in the modern NBA, which should pretty much guarantee him a role in an NBA rotation off the bat, which translates into my next segment. He's a plug and play prospect. So Liam's going to be a good connecting passer who should really fit in the flow of an offense. He's also a pretty solid cutter. He can play within the flow of an offense. And one disclaimer I do have about Liam McNeeley is that he's probably going to be drafted higher in real life than in rookie drafts for dynasty leagues. He's a limited categorical producer, so I know that his high school stats are a little bit deflated compared to some of the other prospects because of his competition that he was playing against with Mount Verde Academy. So a little bit about his background. He averaged 12.5 points per game, 3.8 rebounds, 2.8 assists, and one steal a game. So that's not really gonna, you know, blow you out of the water in any sort of way of what you want to see in a prospect. But like he's going to be valuable in real life more than fantasy. So a thing about his stats is that if he isn't scoring or hitting on a high efficiency rate, there's not too much that he can bring to the table in a fantasy category league. And he's also one of the guys that I'm going to be fading in rookie drafts and will likely go higher to my point earlier in real life. So some player archetypes I have is Corey Kispert and Kyle Korver. Corey Kispert being more of a medium outcome and Kyle Korver more of a peak outcome. Kyle Korver throwback was an all-star for the Atlanta Hawks once upon a time with Al Horford, Jeff Teague. Noah would know this. He's a Hawks fan. So
Hmm.
yeah, there's also a little bit of sprinkle of Christian Braun. He's a great competitor. He's great on defense, although not the most athletic. And then lastly, let's highlight some big matchups. So December 4th versus Baylor. He's going to be going up against VJ Edgecombe. Should be a great matchup there. Also on December 8th, they're going to go against Texas with Trey Johnson. And then lastly, on December 14th against number 6 Gonzaga. So UConn has a lot of great competition in the preseason and also later in the Big East as well. So we'll go ahead and hit the player attributes in our next slide. So for athleticism, I have Liam at a 7. Not entirely the most athletic, but he is decently quick and shouldn't be a cone on defense. Size, I give him an 8, so he's actually pretty tall at 6'7", 6'8" for a wing prospect. Defense, I give him a 7. Passing a 6. He's not gonna be a ball stopper by any means, but he's also gonna play within the flow of an offense. Dribbling a 6 as well. Jump shot a 9. What he's known for, he's a great three-point shooter on solid efficiency. We'd like to see more volume, and let's see if he can take a increased role in a UConn team looking make a to make a run at a three-peat. So his shooting will definitely be valuable there. NBA ready, plug and play guy. He's going to be rated in as an 8 for us and potential 7. Not the most high potential prospect that you want in terms of a stat set, but he should be a pretty safe bet moving forward.
Okay, so that's going to take us to our next prospect. This is an international prospect that is playing in the NCAA. So this is similar to what happened with like a Lauri Markkanen when he played for the University of Arizona. And we're going to talk about Egor Demin playing out of Russia. He'll be the first Russian player in the NBA after Timothy Mozgov. So it's definitely been a while. So Egor is a 1-3. He's a point guard, shooting guard, small forward. That's kind of one of the themes you'll see about him is it's like he's good at a lot of different things. He's not really a specialist anywhere, but he's not really bad at anything either. So he's a pretty complete player. He's 6'9", 200 pounds. He's a pretty big dude, and he's playing for BYU. So now that we have the new NIL money deals, we're starting to see BYU pull in some big talent, especially for basketball. We know they have AJ DeBansa next year. And then they have, 2 top 25 prospects this year, with obviously Egor being the highlight of that. So he is a jumbo creator. Very similar to those pass, dribble, shoot archetype types of players that the NBA is very, very obsessed with nowadays. He's very crafty. He's got great footwork. Obviously, excellent positional versatility. Again, if you don't have a true point guard on the floor, Egor can absolutely handle ball handling duties as well as playmaking. He uses his length well on defense. He's not producing crazy stocks for you, at least from like a 9-category fantasy basketball perspective, but he is a competent defender. He's not really going to get played off the floor. Some of the player archetypes that I have for him at his absolute peak, if absolutely everything hits in regards to the ceiling that he has, I think he's going to be very similar to somebody like a Franz Wagner. But as of right now, more realistically speaking, I think obviously as the season goes on, if he has a great season, then I will probably stick more with a Franz Wagner comparison. But I think right now he's a little bit more similar to like a Denny Avdia or a Jaime Jaquez, especially with his footwork and his craftiness with his ability to score, especially from the mid-range, reminds me a lot of Jaquez. And just, both he and Denny are at least 6'7", 6'8" and above. And they're all three of those pass, dribble, shoot types of players. Some big matchups that he has. He's going to be playing on January 4th. He's playing Houston, that currently the number 4th ranked team in the country. On January 28th, he's going to be playing Baylor, so he's got a matchup with VJ Edgecombe. And then on February 18th, he's going to be playing the currently number 1 ranked team in the country, Kansas. So there's some big opportunities, at least on a national TV scale, to watch Egor play. So from his prospect ratings, again, like I said, he doesn't really have a weakness anywhere. So athleticism, I give him an 8. He's not an insanely good athlete like some of the other guys we'll talk about later on in this podcast, but he is obviously not, somebody whose athleticism is going to be a problem for him. Size, I gave him a 9. So obviously for like a small forward, 6'9" is not, crazy big by NBA standards, but obviously for a point guard, that is crazy by NBA standards. So since he's kind of a blend of all three, I'm going to give him a bit of an extra boost on his size right now. Defense, I have as a 7. So this is mainly from a fantasy basketball perspective. He's not producing a ton of steals and blocks, but he is, good at staying in front of his man and using his length effectively on defense. So he's not really a negative there, but not really a super positive either. And then, of course, the 3 categories that are probably his better attributes that NBA scouts really like: passing, dribbling, and shooting. I gave him an 8 in each of those categories. NBA readiness, I think he's a 7. He's still a little raw. And like I said, I want to see things clean up on the efficiency side for him. So on his shooting percentages, as well as his turnovers, I need to see things cleaned up a bit there, and maybe for him to put on about 10, 15 pounds or so too. And for his potential, I gave him an 8. So of all the guys on here, I think he's one of my favorites to potentially come in with like a 9 or a 10 potential once we re-review some of these prospects back in March. But we'll see how this season goes for him at BYU. But pretty excited about Egor. He's definitely one of the more higher looked upon prospects, at least within lottery talent right now, and is kind of marking a beginning of BYU maybe starting a little bit more of dominance in basketball. They haven't had anybody get drafted since Jimmer Fredette, so things are definitely going to be changing for BYU, NBA draft talent wise. Our next one, Khaman Maluach. Noah, this one's you. Tell us about the Duke center.
Yeah, so I'm going to just keep practicing and say Khaman Maluach. So hopefully I can continue to say that right throughout the draft cycle. Talking about a incredibly athletic big man going to Duke. 7'2", 250. moves incredibly well for that size. Still a very young prospect, but what I like I said, just athletic big that runs the floor well, blocks shots, makes an impact on defense more so than just the block shots, like just his ability to move well at that size. I don't know how many other ways I'll say that, but another thing is the floor spacing ability. He may not be this elite stretch five, but he was able to knock down some shots in some of the clips I saw of him, which, a guy at that size, if he's able to at least space the floor a little bit, we're seeing it right now with Evan Mobley, where he's starting to, as, a couple of years into his career, shoot a little bit more from beyond the arc. Didn't do it a ton as a rookie, but you kind of saw the upside was there. So I'm not expecting him to come out and, hit three threes a game at Duke and then come into the NBA and be this elite floor spacer. But the upside is there enough for him to be enough of a threat that he can't get like played off the floor because he's not able to do anything unless he's getting lobs thrown to him. Most, I think, of his fantasy impact is going to just be from traditional center stats. I think maybe if he's able to continue to improve that shot, that maybe that comes in as a factor. But I think you're going to get a lot of rebounds on a lot of blocked shots. Depending on how many times he shoots from the perimeter, could impact that field goal percentage. And then maybe a steal thrown in here or there. For player archetype, I have Miles Turner, and I don't think it's because I think this archetype is more from a fantasy perspective because I don't think that they're necessarily similar players just watching them play. But I think he has that upside to be as impactful as Miles Turner is in fantasy with maybe some extra rebounds. And we know how good he's been for the past almost a decade in fantasy hoops. So I would like to see him make that sort of impact. I mean, maybe a better on-court comparison would be a guy like Evan Mobley. I think if he can get to be that level of prospect after his 1 year at Duke, yeah, a lot of teams will be very excited to draft him. A couple of the big matchups, two ranked matchups just next month. Actually, maybe by the time this comes out this month, not sure exactly, but games against Kentucky and Kansas. I think both of those will be, important ones to see what Maluach can do against some good teams. But we can go ahead and look at some of these player ratings that I have down for him. So yeah, a 9 in athleticism. This guy is a freak. And then size 10, 7'2", 250. That'll make a lot of teams very happy. The defensive impact, I think, you could probably put him on the NBA court right now and he'd be able to block some shots. Like he's no doubt in my mind, even if, NBA teams are probably still able to pick him apart a little bit. The passing, I'm giving him a 6. I think that, he's not this elite playmaker, but for a center, I think it's fine. Dribbling a 5, I think it's fine. You're not going to, unless he comes out at Duke and they decide to utilize him in other ways. I think this is something that just with the way that college basketball is played, we may not see exactly what he can do as a passer and as a playmaker or dribbler during his likely single season at Duke. And then sometimes NBA teams are a lot more willing to give them the freedom. So we may not really know exactly what that looks like until then. The jump shot is 7. I think just the fact that at his size he could knock down an open 3 if needed, at least. Like I think that's being pretty conservative on that. I think he's a pretty good, but has the potential to be a 3-point threat, and that's all we kind of need out of him. NBA ready, I think an 8. Like I said, I think on defense, he's a guy that you can make an impact now. Offense, probably a little bit more of a work in progress, but depending on where he gets drafted, if he has the right point guard setting him up, could be a lot of easy buckets early on. Potential 9, I think, just the idea of this 7'2", 250 guy that can move incredibly well, potentially knock down threes, block every shot. Like teams are going to be trying to figure out how to slow down Victor Wembanyama, and a guy as athletic as this is probably one of the better ways to do it.
I love that. I love that last line because that's what's going to happen is remember back in the day with Shaq, people started drafting just giant human beings, as big of guys as they could to counteract the physical presence of Shaq. And I think what we'll start seeing is guys or teams making specific draft choices in order to counteract the talent of Victor Wembanyama. So getting somebody who's around a similar size as him and has the athleticism to potentially keep up with him movement wise is going to be huge for some of these teams that are looking to compete with the Spurs moving forward. So I absolutely love that last line there. And one disclaimer I'll also say about Duke. So we are actually going to discuss 3 Duke players today. So Duke is absolutely a team that if you're a dynasty basketball player, you need to be watching Duke pretty much all season. And so with that being said, I'm going to go backwards a slide here. I actually dispersed out the matchups for each of the 3 Duke players a little bit, just so we're not showing the same matchup on each one. So on this first slide here, these are the early matchups in the first month of the season. In November, they're going to play Kentucky and Kansas. And then as we go through the other Duke players, we'll discuss the other big matchups that they have moving forward. But all right, so that's going to bring us to our second Duke player. So this is Kon Kneuppel. He is a shooting guard, small forward. He is 6'7", 217 pounds. So he's a 5-star recruit playing out of Wisconsin. You could just look at him, look at his face. He looks like he's from Wisconsin. So he is an elite shooter. He is a very, very high IQ player. He's a perfect connector piece. Honestly, a lot of what he reminds me of, the only thing he's missing is the extremely high steal rate. But basically, the type of prospect that he is reminds me of like a jumbo Reed Shepherd a little bit, because I think the shooting might be at least close to like kind of the historic level that Reed Shepherd was at. I think we'll see him shoot likely near 40% from 3, as well as, maybe close to 50% from the floor in general. I would not be surprised from that at all. And just a great plug and play connector piece. Somebody who's going to fit into any type of lineup. He's a strong physical build. He plays tough. This is not one of those white boy shooters who's going to get back down in the post, who's going to get played off the floor because he doesn't play tough enough defense. Kneuppel is not like that whatsoever. He's a tough dude. He'll hang in there. He'll dive for loose balls. He'll get dirty. He'll get bloody. He's definitely somebody that you want on your team. His limitations would be in his athleticism and defense. He's not going to blow you away athletically. He's not the fastest guy. He doesn't jump the highest. But again, he makes up for that with effort as well as toughness. Some player archetypes for him. Trey Murphy is one of them. Excellent shooter, excellent connector piece, and also has some length to play as a wing and guard wing-sized players. And also another one, which I think is probably more accurate, is he's kind of like a jumbo Grayson Allen. Grayson Allen's about 6'4", though, so Kneppel's a lot bigger than that, but more so the great shooting as well as the toughness, the tenacity that he plays with reminds me a lot of Grayson Allen, so he's kind of like a bigger version of that with maybe cleaner shooting. Some big matchups that he has coming up, or that Duke has coming up. So like Noah talked about, Duke's going to be playing Kentucky and Kansas this year. They also in November, so they got 3 big matchups against top 25 teams in November. So pay close attention to Duke, especially with Duke having Cooper Flagg. They're likely going to be on national TV quite a bit this year. So on November 22nd, they're going to be playing number 10 Arizona. And on February 9th is going to be their first of 2 matchups with, obviously, their rival North Carolina, who's currently ranked number 9 in the country right now. So those are 2 big ones that you don't want to miss. I mean, really, you should be watching Duke all year, especially if you play dynasty basketball. Athleticism, again, nothing crazy that's eye-popping here. I give him a 7. Size, I give him an 8, at least for a shooting guard, small forward. 6'7" to 6'8", as well as the weight that he carries is pretty solid. Defense, a 7. Again, this is probably, the defense and the athleticism are really the only types of limitation that he probably has. Passing, I gave him an 8. He actually does have solid passing. He has high IQ, and he's very, very good at utilizing the gravity that his shot making creates in order to find his open teammates. Dribbling, I gave him a 7. Dribbling's not really going to be his job. Taking the ball down the floor, as well as slashing to the rim's not really going to be his job. Jump shot, 10. This is one of the few guys that's going to have a 10 as one of his ratings, and his jumper, I think, is pristine. It's going to be very similar, like I said, numbers-wise to what Reed Shepherd did last year. NBA ready, I gave him a 9. This is a plug-and-play piece, especially if we're talking one of those teams late in the lottery. Let's say the Spurs pick late in the lottery this year, or potentially the Hornets pick late in the lottery or something like that. This is plug-and-play into your lineup. He's helping to contribute to win now basketball immediately in the 2025-2026 season. Potential, I give him an 8. So this is definitely the type of player who, do not panic, dynasty managers. Next season, I can almost guarantee you he will not do that well in Summer League. He's not one of those players that does super well on his own team. He is somebody who greatly benefits when he has star teammates playing around him. And you're going to see that when he's playing in the starting 5 of the Duke lineup as well too. And then obviously once he gets from Summer League to the NBA, you'll see a much bigger impact from him when he has good teammates to play around him, as well as guys to take advantage of his shooting, creating openings within the defense as well too. Ooh, okay. So We are, of course, going to be discussing all of the likely top 4 in the 2025 NBA draft class, and we're going to be talking about one of those right here. Mitchell, your boy, Filipino heritage, Dylan Harper. Let's hear about him.
Yeah, Dylan Harper is probably my favorite prospect outside of Cooper Flagg this year. He's someone who could really do it all. But let's go ahead and look into his attributes, physical attributes per se. He's a pretty solid jumbo-sized guard at 6'6". He's pretty stocky at 215 pounds, and he's also on the younger side as a true freshman. And one thing I really love about Dylan Harper is that he's a versatile guard who can play both guard spots. And this is really because of his ideal size and feel for the game. He's not going to be someone who's on the shorter side. He can guard both positions. And I love these type of prospects personally at the top of the draft because they translate well for fantasy purposes because of their ability to grab both assists and rebounds for those counting stats. So think like Lonzo Ball, Cade Cunningham, Amen Thompson, and LaMelo Ball. He's in that similar mold as a jumbo-sized point guard. And he can also guard 1 to 4. He may lack the burstiness, but he's more of like that positional type of defender, like a Drew Holiday that doesn't rely on his athleticism. And also kind of like shades of PJ Tucker as well. He's a little bit bigger than Drew, similar to like PJ. He's like 6'5", 6'6", but he doesn't allow the offensive players to really back him down in the post. Also, he's this great self-creator on offense. He loves to play that bully ball style. He's very cerebral, and he's a mismatch nightmare. He's great at absorbing contact and getting good looks at the rim due to his strength, and he's very creative at drawing fouls and welcomes contact. One thing I'd like to see Dylan Harper improve on is to develop more as a facilitator. In high school, he only averaged 2.7 assists per game. This may be because he was kind of more tasked to be a more of an offensive engine, but I'd like to see him rather than search for his own shot, but make reads for the open man outside of a traditional pass and kick. He's a more of a reactive passer than a guy who really sets his mind to really search for his teammates. So in Rutgers, I like to see him, develop as that lead playmaker, and it'll really open up his game for fantasy basketball purposes. His player archetype is a Jalen Brunson and a Cade Cunningham. I love the size and strength that he uses, which is why I think he's like a Jalen Brunson. But he's also very unique, like a Cade Cunningham. He can hit. He's really like a 3-level scorer, and he does have that size similar to Cade as well. Some of the big matchups I have for Dylan Harper is on November 27th against number 2 Alabama. He's going to go up against another great point guard, probably not going to be drafted in the first round, more in the second round, and Mark Sears, but that's going to be a great matchup to see if he can contain a really shifty point guard and also someone who's relatively strong for his size. Then he's going to go up against Illinois in February 5th, and he's going to go up against Kasparas. Sorry, Andrew, if I butcher this. Kasparas Jakionis from Lithuania, another foreign player, combo type guard wing who can facilitate. So that would be a great matchup for him. And then lastly, against Purdue in March, on March 4th. So let's go ahead and go into some of his attributes. So for athleticism, he's not the burstiest guy, so I give him a 7. But he really, what he lacks in athleticism, he makes up for it in size. He's the ideal size for a point guard at 6'6". He doesn't need to pack on any weight, which allows him to be very sturdy on defense. So I give him an 8 over there. Passing an 8, if he really unlocks that potential at Rutgers, running the flow of the offense and leading that team as an initiator, I could see him move up to a 9 for fantasy. He's a great dribbler. He knows how to create space, sorry. And also his jump shot, I'd like to see him be more efficient from the 3-point line. He likes to take a lot of those step back threes. So if he can settle and generate some cleaner looks, that would be great for his efficiency. And NBA ready, I give him a 9 as long as that he is positioned to a place that allows him to thrive and initiate the ball. And then lastly, I give him a 9 for potential as well. So he's going to be a pretty solid fantasy contributor moving forward in the right role. I can see probably peak outcome like a 25-5 type of guard. I don't see him as, an 8 to 10 assist guy like a Cade Cunningham, but more so in that mold of like a Jalen Brunson with the size of a Cade Cunningham.
All right. So that's going to take us to what I would describe as the highlight reel type of player that's going to be likely drafted in the top 4. This is going to be the guy who's going to be breaking Twitter on most nights. VJ Edgecombe, a shooting guard who's going to be playing for Baylor University this year. So pretty standard size for a shooting guard, maybe even a tiny bit undersized, 6'4", 180 pounds. Let's talk about VJ. VJ is a 99th percentile level athlete. This is somebody who is at the tip top that you can possibly imagine in regards to athletic prowess. Highlight reel dunks, flying basically face level to the rim, chase down blocks, grabbing big rebounds. He is a very, very crazy athlete. And he's also a monster in transition. He has great speed, great burst. When the ball is out in transition, you can easily find him for either an alley-oop because he can jump over everybody, or because he's faster than everybody, he'll have a breakaway layup on his own too. This guy's an absolute menace in transition. Very, very high energy motor. That's a big, big selling point for him. This guy does not quit. He is constantly working. It's crazy too, because he had a really big rise in prominence. Of 99% of top level prospects, at least in high school, they're on varsity by their sophomore year minimum. Majority of them are on varsity their freshman year. VJ Edgecombe didn't make the varsity team until his junior year. And then, all of a sudden shot into the top 100 ranks of the ESPN prospect rankings from there too. So this is a guy who had a little bit of a late blooming in regards to high school. Like, he wasn't very highly touted on the circuits going into high school, and then made a huge name for himself after that. He's an underrated defender, active hands, good steals. Again, really the high energy motor and insane athleticism allows him to do a bit of what he wants on the defensive end. And the jumper is ahead of schedule here. Usually with these types of super athletic players, they usually are pretty prone to bricking on their shots quite a bit, but not VJ. VJ's jump shot, I would say, is a bit ahead of schedule. His handle needs work though. So he can be a bit crazy at times. This is, just due to the type of player that he is, where he can get a bit ahead of himself and lose control of the rock pretty easily and make some mistakes. So the handle does need to get some work. Player archetype. So as you saw from the last player with Ron Harper, we're getting into the top 4 of this draft class that makes this draft class so special. So you're going to start seeing crazier and crazier names in regards to NBA comparisons. The absolute ceiling that could potentially happen for VJ is Russell Westbrook. What most reminds me of them is the athleticism as well as the motor. The motor of not quitting, not giving up on rebounds, chase down blocks, all that type of stuff is peak Russell Westbrook. And I urge you not to think about the Nuggets or Lakers version or Clippers version of Russell Westbrook. Think about his prime, Oklahoma City, when he was a first-round redraft player. This is the type of Russell Westbrook that I'm comparing VJ Edgecombe to. A very, very common comparison in the industry that I had to agree with, because most people keep saying it, and it is true, is Victor Oladipo. He's a lot like him. Also, Jalen Green. Again, all 3 of these guys, 99th percentile level athletes. He reminds me a lot of Green coming out of the G League Ignite too. The only difference is, like, Green has an amazing handle, but the jumper needed a lot of work, whereas VJ has a good jumper, but the handle needs a lot of work. So that's kind of the main difference between them two. But in reality, I see a lot of similarities between them, and I see a lot of similarities for what VJ's fantasy stat set's going to be. It's probably going to look a lot like Jalen Green's, but obviously if he hits the peak of what I want for him to hit, it might look a lot like Russell Westbrook too, because he is a good passer. He fights for rebounds, and he gets good steals too. Big matchups for him. He plays John Calipari's new team, Arkansas, on November 9th. So that's going to be the first week into the season. That's a big one to watch. December 4th, he's playing UConn. So that's going to be Liam McNeeley, as well as just, the third-ranked team in the nation. That's a big one to watch too. And then on February 1st, he's going to be playing the current number 1 team in the country, Kansas. So those are 3 must-watch matchups that you don't want to miss. And of course, like I mentioned earlier, they're going to be playing BYU as well. So VJ Edgecombe is must-see TV. Anytime he's on national TV, you have got to watch this guy. VJ is solid, and he is an absolute highlight reel waiting to happen. All right, on to our prospect ratings. Easy 10 in athleticism. No second thoughts on that one. VJ is an insane athlete. Size, I give him a 7. Again, nothing real crazy about his size. There's no crazy wingspan, height, weight, anything like that. He's pretty standard, or potentially even considered to be undersized for his position. Defense, I give him an 8. 2 steals a game when playing for Bahamas in the FIBA Olympic qualifiers. So one thing that we need to look at, a vast majority of these guys, or pretty much all of them besides VJ, really all we have is just what they did in high school. I guess our last guy, Cooper Flagg, played with the USA team for a little bit as they were preparing for the Olympics. But the only guy who actually has experience playing with grown men, as well as guys who are in professional basketball and guys who are in the NBA, is VJ Edgecombe. On that Bahamas team, playing with Buddy Hield, Eric Gordon, DeAndre Ayton, Kai Jones, just to name a few. So playing amongst men who are professionals, as well as amongst NBA players, VJ averaged 16.5 points, 5.5 rebounds, 3.8 assists, 2 steals per game, and 0.5 blocks per game. Very, very solid output in a high competitive environment. Passing, I gave him an 8. Again, it's not like if it was bona fide Russell Westbrook level, I maybe go to 9, but I want to see how this season plays out before I go crazy on his passing rating. Dribbling is a 7. This is a work in progress. He needs to get that under control to be handled. We need VJ to become controlled chaos. Right now, he's mainly just chaos, which again is why I compare him so often to Russell Westbrook. Jump shot is an 8. This jump shot's ahead of schedule. Like I mentioned, usually guys of this archetype do not have good jump shots, so VJ has a pretty promising one. NBA readiness is an 8. I think he does still need some polishing to do, but I really like his chances to have an instant impact wherever he's drafted. And potential is a 9. So this is someone who could potentially be at 10 potential once we review these prospects back in March moving forward. But for now, I'm going to stick with a 9 for him. I think we only have one guy today that we're going to talk about that has a 10 in potential. So lots
Andrew,
of great stuff.
Before we move on VJ Edgecombe, I think it needs to be reiterated that during the FIBA qualifiers, the team was deferring to VJ Edgecombe down in the clutch as their go-to option. It's something very important to note. He was also very efficient for FIBA qualifiers, and he was, I believe, their second leading scorer behind Buddy Hield. So a lot of promise on this prospect right here.
Absolutely. The motor, the upside, the shooting, it's the athleticism. It's all very, very clear. This is a very, very special prospect. Pretty easily should go in the top 5 unless there's a major injury or some type of crazy regression that we don't see coming. But again, this is the only guy that we really have proof of playing in a high level environment and doing well, playing alongside NBA players. So VJ is absolutely a very, very exciting prospect that a lot of us are looking forward to in this upcoming 2025 draft class. This is a highlight reel, walking highlight reel, must-see TV. All right. On to another highlight reel, the other Rutgers boy. Mitch, tell us about Ace Bailey.
Yeah, so Ace Bailey is a small forward who's 6'9", arguably 6'10" with shoes on. We'll see when the final measurements leak. He's also 200 pounds and also one of the younger prospects in the top 5. So Ace Bailey, tough shot maker, tough shot taker. Kind of reminds me of those tendencies of J.R. Smith. Sometimes he likes to lean into the shoulder, uses pivot, and just hover over you to take a mid-range jumper. But what I really love about him is that he has a rare combination of size, scoring, and athleticism that really opens up his offensive game as a potential 3-level scorer if it all clicks. That all really depends on his shot selection, though. He also has an impressive ability to hit tough shots with the hand in his face, and he gets these shots off due to that peak and honestly really crazy athleticism that he has. And it also should be noted that all great scorers take tough shots. You have to also have that ability to hit these shots in close coverage. So think of scorers like Kyrie, Kobe, Luka. He's going to be in that same mold as a prospect if everything hits. And he's also a scary player out of transition. You do not want to be in his way in the open floor. And he's like just like VJ Edgecombe, but 6 inches taller. He's a 99th percentile athlete as well. What I really enjoy about him is not only is that he's athletic for offensive purposes, but he's also a disruptor on defense. So for in high school, for reference, I know high school stats don't necessarily translate, and he played for, a public school, which often inflates, high school stats, a lot of times. He averaged 33 points, 15 rebounds, which is pretty nuts as a wing, 4 assists and 3 blocks. But in a more real aspect, we saw in his, fantasy stat set when he played in the exhibition with St. John's. He scored 25 points, made four threes, had five rebounds, one assist, one steal, and one block. And he also has those athletic tools that I mentioned to be a disruptor on defense and a great motor to complement that as well. So a great motor often translates into stocks and rebounds. Think of, Ron Holland or Atari Eason. And he also blocks shots well for his position because he can move well and he covers ground quickly. His questionable shot diet is something that could be a problem in terms of fantasy production. We don't, oftentimes we kind of fade players or prospects that efficiency in terms of field goal, um, as a pretty detriment because for someone like Ace Bailey, they're going to be taking 15 to 20 shots in his prime. So that inefficiency could also be due to high school spacing, but in college and in the NBA, the floor is going to be more open for Ace to operate. I'd like to see him settle less for mid-range jumpers and go to the rim more often as you'd want, and really utilize those athletic tools. So at the next level, I hope that he doesn't fall in love with that jumper. Some player archetypes, a classic one is T-Mac, a 6'9" self-creator on the wing, super athletic. And then also Brandon Miller and Jason Tatum. So these are some guys that you really love in terms of a fantasy contributor. These guys are tall, they can generate defensive stats, and they're prototypical wings that you really want to build around. So Ace Bailey is someone you can really be excited on. And he's the only one that I honestly see to have an argument in real life to go above a Cooper Flagg. There is that 10% chance that that does happen. If Cooper doesn't, produce that offensive output that you want to see in a number one pick, where Ace Bailey surely will, but it really ultimately depends on his shot diet and if he can stay engaged on defense. Some of the big matchups, as I mentioned earlier, is, against Alabama in November 27th. A key matchup there would be against Grant Nelson, another wing player. That should be a pretty competitive battle between the two. Then we have Illinois again, and then Purdue in March. So let's go on to some of his uh, prospect ratings. Athleticism, I gave him a 10 because not only is he, you know, relatively tall for his size, he really is a skywalker for someone who's 6'10", which is something that should be noted. Size is great, obviously at 6'9", 6'10" for a three to I don't even know if he could be a four, but he's more so a three. Defense as an eight. Discipline is the only thing that really holds him back. He has the tools, he has the motor. I hope he doesn't reach too much and gamble for steals. If he can stay disciplined, I can definitely see this go up. But in terms of fantasy perspective, you'd love to see that ambition to go for those blocks and steals and through the passing lanes. I'd like to see him be a better passer. He's kind of known as a black hole right now. So if he could be a better connective piece, that would be great for his development. Dribbler, he could improve in there. I give him a 7, jump shot an 8. I'd like to see him be a little bit more efficient and take cleaner looks rather than self-create for himself all the time. So hopefully Dylan Harper can free open that offensive skill set for him. NBA ready, I give him 7. He's still a relatively raw prospect in his own regard. And then potential a 9. We'd love to see if he can become that 27, 28 point per game guy with like 7 rebounds and 3 to 4 assists like a Jason Tatum. But let's see where if he can get there. There's still a long ways to go for Ace Bailey.
All right. So, Noah, you've been waiting a little bit for this opportunity. Tell us about the crown jewel of the 2025 NBA draft.
Yeah, it's exciting that you guys are giving me the opportunity to talk about this, kind of guy that's going under the radar a little bit named Cooper Flagg. You guys have him listed here, 6'9", 205. A lot of everybody knows about Cooper Flagg. I know I joke about him being this under the radar guy. As we're recording this earlier today, he signed a NIL deal with Gatorade that's going to get him a ton of money. Um, yeah, he's what every team is trying to get this year. If they're going to go through a rough season, there's going to be a lot of teams that are going to be, planting their flag or whatever the fun saying is going to be this draft cycle. He is a generational talent. I got it right there in the notes. Like he's going to be able to impact the game in a lot of ways. He already has in high school while practicing against Team USA. He's going to do it at Duke, and he's going to do it in the NBA, and he's going to do it rather quickly. I have down here that he is a shot creator. I don't think that he's necessarily this, guy that you're going to say, okay, let's just run our offense through him. I know when we were messaging about it before we did this, I had Paolo Banchero as a comparison for him. And I think that, the fact that he just had this unreal 50-point game probably just changes that comparison a little bit. But in my mind, he's a guy that can create his own shot. Not to the level as Paolo, but he's a bigger forward that can create his own shot. He's an athletic freak. Like, I know you guys have joked about a couple of the other white guys that are going early in this draft, but like a lot of them are just catch and shoot guys, but Cooper Flagg is not that at all. Like he can jump out of the gym and he showed that a lot on pretty much every time he stepped on the court. And that's led to a lot of blocked shots and I think a lot of rebounds. Like he's an incredible defender. It's going to play really well in nine cat fantasy leagues. Some of the archetypes we have Scottie Pippen, again, very, very good defensive player from the forward spot. Brianna Stewart, I didn't come up with that one. I saw that one on Twitter and I was just trying to find the tweet and I finally found it. A guy named Mike Grimanov. He does like a lot of stuff with the draft. Pretty good source of draft knowledge if you want to check him out on Twitter at Mike Grib8. But he had tweeted that, and I was like, oh, like I kind of like that, like a very versatile player. And it's also just cool to me that you're getting WNBA players as NBA draft prospect comps because WNBA players are incredible at basketball. So it's fun when the play styles can be similar enough. Now I would say that Cooper Flag can jump a little bit higher, he's a little bit more athletic, but the play style is fairly similar aside from that. And then fun to get another throwback guy in here with Andre Karolinko, a guy that can hit threes, guy that can get defensive stats. I think, you know, if you were playing fantasy basketball when Karolinko was around, like disclaimer, I was not, but obviously a guy that's going to be incredible for category leagues. Some more of the big matchups. I know Andrew already mentioned a few of them. Late February matchup against Illinois, and then in March playing against another top 10 team that probably will still be a top 10 team in North Carolina. Fun to see how, matchups aside, like seeing how this guy does in the Duke UNC rivalry on the road, like if he steps up and plays well in the big moment, I think that should just solidify any opinions that we have about him. But we can go ahead and take a look at some of these like player ratings for him because they're a lot of fun. 10 for athleticism. Like I said, this guy can jump out of the gym. I would say a different style of athlete from guys like VJ Edgecombe and Ace Bailey, but nonetheless, still incredibly athletic, especially for his height. Size, a 9, like 6'9", 205. Like, and I don't know, maybe this is a little bit high, but I think that considering what he's able to do on the court, he's incredibly talented for a guy at his size, and then adding in the size on that, I guess is kind of my point there. The defense is a 9. Didn't want to give it a perfect 10, but man, he's going to be really freaking good pretty quickly. Passing and dribbling, both at about a 7. I wouldn't say that those are the strongest assets or facets of his game, but I mean, we'll see if he's able to continue to develop them in college. We'll see how much playmaking opportunities he's even given based on the way that college basketball is played. Jump shot, a 9. I think is a guy that's going to be a very dangerous shooter. Um, may not be a guy that's hitting 3 or 4 threes a game, but he'll be able to balance that in with the rest of his game to be, you know, a threat from beyond the arc. And, his ability to hit shots off the dribble, create his own shot, mid ranges, post fades, things like that. And then obviously get to the rim and dunk the ball. A lot of those will set up open shots and he'll get to showcase that ability a little bit more. Got a 10 for NBA ready and potential. I mentioned the Team USA camp. I know Andrew was saying that VJ Edgecombe is one of the only guys that is in this draft cycle that has already had some success against international, like professional talent. But I want to add Cooper Flagg to that list because during those practices, he was being talked about like he was the best player while playing against alongside a number of other young NBA players that have tons of upside playing against Team USA. So yeah, this guy I think is going to be able to be after having a year playing at Duke, even more NBA ready. So it's going to be a ton of fun in fantasy and in real life getting to watch him. And the potential is 10 as well. I think that there's a reason that he's widely considered the top prospect in this cycle. And the upside is going to be a ton of fun on the defensive end, on the offensive end, with his shot, with his ability to dunk the ball. It's going to be a lot of like highlight plays on top of just really solid basketball. So very excited about what Cooper Flagg can do. And I just wish, that my Hawks could have won the draft lottery any other year than the one they did.
Noah, quick question for you. I'm
Yeah.
going to put you on the spot. So let's say
Okay.
next year there's a startup dynasty draft. How high does Cooper Flagg go?
Well, I'll tell you what, and it may have just been because of the lack of a buy-in, but that Devi League I had read the rules and read them wrong every single time. But I was ready to take him at 5 over
Oh,
Halliburton,
wow.
but for some reason and that's again because it's a Devi league and there was no buy-in aside from like, or small buy-in. I was like, yeah, why wouldn't I just buy into the hype and see what we can do? So I think in a realistic scenario, it could depend on landing spot, depending on how well he plays at Duke, but off the top of my head, I want to say like top 15 is incredibly realistic, potentially even top 10. But if, you know, I feel like with Wemby, he was obviously this incredible prospect that everybody was going to be high on immediately. But the fact that he got drafted by the Spurs just kind of amplified him as a prospect. Because I remember before that, I was like, like I think he might be top 5 in Dynasty before he's drafted. And then he got drafted to the Spurs and was like, this is a match made in heaven. Like probably top 3 now. I know I had 2 startups or a couple more, maybe more than that cycle, but I took him at 2 in one league. And then in a different league, he went 1. It was Rhett Bauer's league. So, and Rhett was the one who took him. So, that was my long-winded answer to say that I could easily see Cooper Flagg going top 10, but if he goes to the right spot, maybe even earlier.
Very
Very
great
good.
point. And like we talked
Do y'all
about,
agree? Like, do y'all think that's way too
no,
high?
I agree. No, it should be minimum top 20, I would say.
Okay.
Like you
I
mentioned, generational
Yeah.
talent. And like that's why there's a Hall of Famer as one of his comparisons in Scottie Pippen. So go on NBA reference
Yeah.
and go back and look at some of Scottie Pippen's best years. And then if you're a 9 category fantasy basketball player, think about how those best years would translate into a 9 category ranking. I guarantee you Scottie Pippen, we're talking about senior, not junior, the one that currently plays, Scottie Pippen Sr., I guarantee you, in regards to 9 category fantasy basketball, he was easily within the top 20 on a yearly basis in his prime. Same goes for Andrei Kirilenko, which for some of you may be kind of a deep cut. I know he's not like an NBA Hall of Fame or anything, but also while you're on Basketball Reference, go check out Andrei Kirilenko's stat set and think about where he probably ranked from a 9 category perspective during some of his prime years, producing in pretty much every single category, but most notably defense, which obviously inflates your value a lot. That's why we value Victor Wembanyama so high, is because of his defense too. And Flagg's going to bring a very similar type of aspect. Obviously, he's not going to be averaging Hakeem level blocks like Wemby is, but Flagg will be doing both steals and blocks in addition to having a competent offensive game. I mean, that's why we compared him to guys like Scottie and Andre, because he's not a number one scoring option such as a Paolo, but he's a secondary, tertiary option who obviously can, probably still reach close to or at 20 points per game. But his biggest job is going to be impacting the floor in pretty much all aspects, not just scoring, but especially on the defensive end. This is what makes him so special. And with us in fantasy basketball, dynasty basketball, yeah, you should be valuing him at least within the top 20 dynasty wise. So
so
Noah, do you
Andrew,
have any
can I
names
add
you're
something
thinking of?
really quick?
Yeah, actually, go ahead and
I
ask yours first.
Yeah, so something that there's this very interesting thread on Reddit back in the day. I believe it's like a 5-year-old post that dug into different archives of historical players. And one that really stuck really to me was Sean Marion. And Sean Marion
Mm.
in, the mid 2000s for the Phoenix Suns playing with Steve Nash is a great comparison statistically to a Cooper Flagg. And during those days, he was taken over the likes in all things considered in a redraft setting over a Kobe Bryant, and he ranked consistently in the top 3 to 5. So Cooper Flagg could seriously be in the same vein as like a Scotty Barnes, a Sean Marion, Andre Kirilenko, and because of those defensive stats, not only in blocks, but because he plays on the perimeter, those steals, that's a gnarly combination. And to your point, Noah, I can pretty comfortably take him top 10 in a startup draft as well if you
Mm.
have a rebuilding direction.
Noah, do you have any leagues that you're tanking in for Dynasty this year?
Um, let's see. I have some that I'm trying to tank in, but week one didn't go very well for that. Um, so we'll see. I have three 30-team ones, and in two of them, or I guess really mainly one of them, I thought my team was going to be really bad, but week one and now so far week two are going pretty well. So hopefully I at least get a chance to get him in one league or another. If not, maybe I'll try and make a trade in my home dynasty league to get some early picks.
There we go. There we go. Because at least landing in the top five is really all that matters. Specifically, the top four. If you're tanking this year and you get one of Cooper, Ace, Harper, or VJ, that's absolutely a win for you. And one thing I wanted to mention too is some honorable mentions. So we covered 9 players today, but there's some other guys that easily could have been in this presentation here, and might very well be needed to be inserted into this when we re-review some of these top-level NCAA prospects leading into March Madness. So for starters, it's going to be Trey Johnson, playing at the University of Texas, an extremely good 3-level scorer. Reminds me a lot of like a jumbo Cam Thomas, or also like a DeMar DeRozan. I think is very accurate to a Trey Johnson. Can shoot from anywhere. Not a crazy level athlete that is able to get his shots, but is just someone who is has a high IQ and is really able to put up good scoring. Kasparis Jakusionis, like Mitch mentioned earlier, as well as Will Riley. Both of these guys play for the University of Illinois. Both are potential lottery picks. I know at least for Hoop Intellect. Any of you guys are fans of Hoop Intellect and the content that Keandre makes? He has both Jakusionis and Riley in the lottery of his very early 2025 mock draft right now. So that's obviously notable. Another person that he has in the lottery that we could easily be talking about in a few months is Drake Powell, currently playing for North Carolina. Also, Asa Newell playing for Georgia, and Boogie Fland playing for Arkansas under Coach Cal. These are all some notable prospects that you should also keep an eye on, and easily guys that we could probably go into more detail on when we re-review these NCAA prospects later on in the season. So with that being said, for starters, Mitchell, anything else you wanted to add about the 2025 draft class?
Not really. I'm really just excited. I'm glad both of you, or both of me and you, Andrew, are tanking within our leagues we share together. So we're going to be very tapped into the process, and we'll have a very sharp eye on some of these guys and internationally as well.
Yes, yes. So I have one tanking team in one of our salary leagues, and then in our inaugural season for the Angle Dynasty League, you are choosing to tank year one, which is totally a viable strategy, especially from a startup draft. I think one of the better times to tank is after the initial startup draft in year one of the league. So I like that strategy that you're going with there, and it's gonna be a fun ride. And I know with like obviously like my brother Phil is tanking in a different league. Actually, I think he's tanking in the Angle League as well too. So all three of us who talk a lot about basketball, we're going to be very very much salivating over this 2025 draft class, especially if we watch a lot of Duke games. Noah, where can the people follow you and find your work at? Let them know.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Noah Rubin 22. Haven't had a podcast episode in a few weeks with my Tank Me Later podcast just because life gets busy. But I do tweet out any podcasts that I do and some articles. I've been doing more of those with the season starting. And then also you can see my content over at Roto World. Got my weekly Dynasty column coming out on Wednesdays, as well as the Roto World basketball show, which I'm now helping out with this year, also comes out on Wednesdays. So basically, if you want to find my content, you can just find it on Twitter. Everything pretty much gets tweeted out at Noah Rubin 22.
Very, very good. So keep an eye on that, and keep an eye on all these prospects that we talked about today. We're going to have a lot of fun watching them throughout the year and see how that turns into, dynasty draft capital for us. So that's going to do it for us today. Make sure to subscribe to this channel if you are new. Leave a like, leave a comment down below. Let us know how you feel about any of these prospects. How do you feel about Cooper Flagg already being deemed as a top 20 dynasty asset? Let us know in the comments below, and we'll see you guys next time.
Call me captain, always gotta look for him. Beat so tight, I almost put a hook on it. Verse so fire, almost put a cook on it. Had this shit jumping, looking like I put a foot on it. Got 100 on a dash when I book Sonic. Only game that I play, got a rook on it. Got a flow so hard that it looks solid, y'all be cynical.